Hi everyone, this is Rabbi Rachel Davidson. I work with Rabbi Raina Grossman here at Lionsgate. So I'm recording this video today to bring a little bit of a Jewish studies class, just a short one, into your homes. I hope that you're all having an okay day. I know that this can be a difficult time. So today we're going to be looking a little bit at brachot, blessings. We're going to look at the contexts that Jews traditionally say blessings in, and we're going to look at why Jews say brachot. And so we're going to look back at some of the traditional sources from the Talmud and from the codes to see what we can learn about brachot together. And if you have any questions, please feel free to call over to the office, and we would be happy to talk them over with you. And I, of course, am sad that we can't be doing this together in person. So I want to start today with the traditional blessing that is said for Torah study. If you would like to say it along with me, it's the blessing that's used for candle lighting, the same intro, except instead of saying Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbat, we'll say La'asok B'divrei Torah. So, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kidshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. So, just by way of introduction, to learn a little bit about how the rabbis made the laws that Jews follow, we'll just peek a little bit inside their heads, inside the rabbinic psychology. And these are mostly from rabbis who were living around 0 CE, roughly. So what they were doing was looking at the Tanakh, the Torah, or the Old Testament, in very creative ways. And they were saying, oh, these are the laws we have. What's the grounding or the proof text in Torah? So for brachot, the main proof text is a line where it says, Ve'achalta v'savata uverachta et Adonai Elohecha. Right? So what that means, and if you're familiar with the brachot that are said after meals, this might sound familiar to you. We say it then. So what that means is you ate and you were satisfied and you blessed Hashem, your God. So when we look at that, it appears to us to just be a narrative, right? The Israelite people ate, they felt full, they blessed God. For the rabbis, these are actually instructions for how to live your life. So we'll come back to this in a minute, but first I want to lay out the broad categories of when you're supposed to say a bracha. So as we see in that verse, the initial instinct is that when you're satisfied, when you feel full, you say a blessing. So the rabbis will go on to say, if you eat a tiny little bit of food, if you're just tasting something, for example, when you're cooking, you wouldn't say a bracha, a blessing then, because what you're doing when you say a bracha is thanking God for fulfilling your needs. This is really different from the context of where one human being might bless another human being, for example. So if we look at the priestly blessing, this is from the Tanakh, and it's used in liturgy. If we look at the priestly blessing, what it says is, Yivarechecha Hashem, may God bless you and keep you, right? So there, you're invoking God's name, and you're invoking God's power, right? You're really just acting as a channel. You're really naming God's grace. When we bless God, and you'll recognize the traditional formula, you say, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, blessed are you, God, King of the universe, right? So when we talk about lighting the candles, we're saying God is already blessed, right? There's no way that we can go to God and give God a blessing. In fact, what we're doing is realizing the blessings in our own lives and thanking God for those blessings. So drawing from that, Maimonides, the Rambam, in the Mishnah Torah says that there are 3 types of blessings that all Jews should say. Brachot hanaya, uvirchot mitzvot, uvirchot hodaya. So those are blessings for something pleasurable, blessings for mitzvot, and blessings of gratitude. So a bracha hanaya is when we consume something from the world. Often it's eating or smelling something pleasurable. Although even if you eat something that you don't love but it satisfies you, you say a blessing before and after. So this is a way of talking about the needs we have and how God is fulfilling those needs, those worldly needs. The next category is birchot mitzvot. That is a blessing that you say before doing a commandment. So for example, when you're lighting candles, you say a blessing before lighting the candles. And that's because you are recognizing that when we do a commandment, we're bringing holiness and sanctity into the world. And we're recognizing that God is the source of all holiness. And finally is Birkot Hodaya. Those are blessings of gratitude, right? And so some of these might be spontaneous. You might walk through the world and see something beautiful and say, wow, God, that is just incredible. But also we might see Birkot Hodaya in our traditional liturgy, right? So during the Amidah, during the standing prayer, the 18 blessings, we thank God for healing the sick. We thank God for giving us good judgment. And so that's a way of thanking God for more of the non-material, non-physical things in our lives that we're grateful for. So now I would like to actually zero in on the blessings that are said over food, because we can find out a lot from those about why the rabbis thought it was so important to say blessings. And this is reflected in the fact that a large chunk of the literature on brachot, on blessings, is about the blessings that are said over food. So first, we'll look at a passage from the Tosefta. If you've ever heard of the Mishnah, this was written at the same time. The Mishnah was written roughly between 0 CE and 220 CE, or you could say 70 CE to 220 CE. And so these are really the earliest rabbis in the post-biblical period, and they're starting to write down halakha, Jewish law, and they're having arguments and discussions about halakha and about Jewish law. And so everything, all of those arguments and conversations that didn't make it into the Mishnah were compiled at the same time in the Tosefta. So it's a bigger work that contains more information about all of these laws. So I'll read it first in Hebrew and then in English. Lo yit'om adam klum ad sheyevarech, shene'emar la'Hashem ha'aretz u'meloha. Hanehene min ha'olam hazeh belo bracha me'el, ad sheyitiru lo. Kol hamitzvot lo yishtamesh adam bepanav yadav v'raglav, ela lichvod konehu. Shene'emar kol pa'al Hashem lema'anehu. So in English, a person should not taste anything until he makes a bracha on it. As it is said, to Hashem is the earth and its fullness. A person who receives pleasure from this world without a bracha makes inappropriate use of sacred property. So we'll finish that in a second, but just to unpack some of that information. So what they first say is that a person shouldn't eat any food without saying a bracha. Why? The answer is that everything in the earth belongs to God. So they quote something from Psalms, to Hashem is the earth and its fullness. They quote something from Psalms to prove that everything in the world around us really belongs to God. And when we make use of it, we are in essence borrowing something from God. Now they compare this to another principle, which is me'il, and this is the idea that nothing in the temple could be used for profane actions. they could only be used for sacred actions. So whether that's the clothing that the priests wore or the food that was offered up as a sacrifice, none of these things should have been used outside the temple or for anything profane. So that's fairly narrow, and the rabbis are actually dramatically broadening it, right? They're saying this doesn't only apply to things that were used in the temple. In fact, this applies to everything from the natural world. All of it belongs to God, and we, in a sense, need to ask permission before we use it. So to conclude with, the rabbis say, a person should use his face, his hands, and his feet only for the honor of his Creator. As it is said, every creation of Hashem is for his sake. So what this tells us is that our entire bodies, our whole selves, should be used in service to God. So I think we learn a few things about brachot from this passage. First, we learn that everything in the world belongs to God. It's not really ours. We might own a piece of land, but ultimate ownership really is God's. And so we're just using the produce in our temporary lives here. And so we say a bracha in order to recognize the sanctity of the objects around us, to recognize how holy things are, and to give gratitude for the fact that we are able to use those things. I think the second point here is that when we consume things from God's creation, we should be using that energy and using that consumption in order to lead a good life and to be God-fearing and to live in awe. So, I'm going to drink a drink of water. As we near our conclusion, I want to talk a little bit about what saying blessings can bring into our lives. So in Judaism, of course, there's many, many, many blessings. I'm sure you can think of a few, right? Like saying a bracha before eating challah, saying a bracha when you wash your hands or light candles, saying a bracha before you eat. There's also some that are a bit more obscure, like you say a bracha when you see and hear thunder and lightning, or when you see a rainbow, some of these really big acts of creation. There's even a bracha that's very relevant right now for the springtime. There's a special blessing for when the trees start flowering with beautiful blossoms. So I think that's an especially nice one. So there's the question of why do Jews say so many blessings, right? So I want to read you a passage from Menachot, which is a tractate of the Talmud. And the Talmud is written and compiled between 220 CE and 600 CE, roughly. The end date is in question by scholars. So here's the quote from Menachot, from the Talmud, and then I'll read it out to you in English as well. Tanya, Haya Rabbi Meir Omer, Chayav Adam levarech 100 brachot bechol yom, shene'emar, Ve'ata Yisrael, ma Hashem Elohekecha, Shoel me'amcha, Rav Chia Baria, de Rav Ave, Beshavta ve'yomai tave trach umimle lehu, de'is park me umagdi. It switches into Aramaic, which gets a bit more tricksy there. So in this passage it says, Rabbi Meir used to say, a person must make 100 blessings a day. And where does Rabbi Meir get that from? He gets that from a verse in Deuteronomy where it says, and now Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you? So there's a pun here. So we're going to get into the Hebrew for a minute. So in this it says, Ma Hashem Elokecha shoel me'amcha. Ma means what? What does God ask from you? Now, ma sounds very similar to the Hebrew word for 100, which is mea. So rather than reading it as, what does God ask of you? A question. Rabbi Meir reads it as, 100 things does God ask you for. 100 brachot. And this is a very traditional way for the rabbis to investigate a text. They make puns, they look for things confusing, they really enjoyed wordplay. So he says, we owe God 100 blessings a day. And then it discusses how another rabbi would try to do that 100 by smelling all kinds of different lovely spices throughout the day. So I think what Rabbi Meir is getting at is that God has given us a lot, right? We certainly did not earn all of the food that we eat, all of the nice clothing that we wear, let alone the opportunity to see beautiful trees and flower. Those things, we work hard in our lives. We work hard for what we have. And in a certain way, all of those things are unearned gifts. And so by saying brachot, we're having gratitude for those gifts. And I think even for people who don't feel a close relationship with God or don't relate to God in this kind of way, feeling gratitude for the holy power of the world around us and for the gifts we've been given can be very powerful and important. So I want to conclude with a quote from Rabbi Marcia Prager. She is a contemporary rabbi. So she says, "Through the practice of blessing, we develop an ever-deepening receptivity to the abundant love and joy flowing through creation. We learn to accept that love, absorb it into our souls, and offer it back to the source with joy. In this way, we come to feel the presence of God move within us and through us." So I hope today, even though we are in a difficult, complicated, scary time, I hope today you find one new thing to offer up a blessing for. One new thing that feels powerful or holy or that you feel grateful for. So goodbye, everybody, and please feel free to call us anytime.